Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. Today is Friday, December 19th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that webpage, look in the upper left-hand corner, there'll be two words that say Start Here. You click on that, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and an explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 21 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. From that webpage, you can also download the actual worksheet process itself. You can download a whole host of audio files of shows like this one where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your App Store and type in the three words HeartLand Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains a reality management worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Drag-On Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. Secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, please do so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, and or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred. Alternatively, you can join us live most weekdays. We'll have some time off for the holidays coming up, but most weekdays from 11 to noon Central Time, you can go to zoom.us, tell them you want to join a meeting, and enter the meeting ID number for this first hour, which is 853-2357-4173. That's 853-2357-4173. And if you join through the phone, you'll be automatically muted, and you can toggle in and out of mute with *6. And as I've mentioned, we greatly appreciate whenever anybody shares with us their thoughts, their opinions, how it's going for them, what's landing well for them, because it helps us live into our intention to be of service, and it just makes it far easier for that to happen. So here we are. We've had worksheets that I've shared. We've had processing in group meetings. We've just drifted a bit away from the Krishnamurti reading, which we'll get back to if nobody has any other comment or has a question to raise. My overview, trying to keep in line with the idea of all of this work, the reason for the internet show, is to present practical tools for managing my emotional state and to live into Guy Finley's statement that there's nothing more practical than true spirituality. And so to highlight, some of the keys in the processing for me have been to recognize how valuable it is for me to recognize when my emotional process or the emotional process of the person I'm talking to is vacillating or going up too high. I shouldn't say too high. It's going up to a high level. And when that happens, the more I can absolutely refuse to talk about the logistics, the details, the content of whatever's being discussed, and turn the focus back to my processing my emotions and work to dismantle, diffuse the intense emotions, and do that before I respond, then huge benefits are accrued every time I do that in my life. The next thing is to remember that whatever comes out of my mouth is only, always, and forever going to tell you about what's going on inside of me. It's not going to tell you about what's going on inside somebody else. It's not going to tell you about you, and it's not going to tell you about the world around you in any way that's useful, because for it to be useful for you, you have to have the direct experience of it. You have to be awake in the moment. And the next piece is there's a piece of work that Dr. Michael Ryce has kind of a little bit hidden, but it's in the worksheet. I think it's from the Healing Through Relationships worksheet. It might be codependence or interdependence, but either way, it's a worksheet that has you list everybody that you think has offended you, and then make a column that you list what they did to offend you, and what your punishment thought is to them, and what your advice is to them. And at the end, you write out how you're going to apply your advice to them in your life. And this is based on what Dr. Michael Ryce is sharing, this wisdom. He didn't create it, but he's tapped into it and he shares it. He used to share it a lot more frequently, which is that even if I think I know what's going on inside somebody else, all I really know there is what I believe I would be thinking or feeling if I was in their situation. And so the essence of the core of that tool is that any advice I give another person may be good for them, and yet it's guaranteed to be the perfect advice for me. And if I want to accelerate my practice, I will stop giving advice to other people. I'll listen to it, what my mind would want to tell that person. And even if I do say it out loud, I'll have another part of my mind that's monitoring and saying, oh, Tim, you really need to do this because this just came out of your mouth as a suggestion or as an advice to this person. And so if I can hold on to these primary observations about the core dynamics that make this set of tools so effective in their process for me, I can go farther faster. I will make more progress in my own personal work if I remember that these series of truths, it's kind of like a modified version of the 10 bottom line observations, but it's specific to this dynamic of communicating and interaction with another person and understanding that I will never experience an emotion that isn't created inside me. So therefore, when I tap into an emotion that I don't like, I can take a breath and turn inside and ask myself with just childlike curiosity, without beating myself up, I can just turn and ask, gee, how am I creating this? And I just had a session with a 29-year-old earlier this morning where it's only his like third session, and we're trying to help him understand these tools. And he has a dynamic with a mother who's not mentally healthy. She's very upset. And so she keeps making statements to people and saying them out loud and in texts and emails that are really negative and blaming and accusing. And I was going through this list of observations with this 28, 29-year-old, and I said, what you don't understand is that as you keep working to be aware, to observe in the moment, that you're the one that creates every emotion you experience, you move yourself closer to the day when you wake up and realize in this deep felt sense, oh, I really am the one who's creating whatever I experience in here. It's not created by what that person said or this person didn't do, this economy. And wow, that deep felt sense realization that I'm the one that creates every emotion that I experience puts me a quantum leap closer to the day I wake up and realize, oh my gosh, this means that everybody around me is creating their emotions and I'm not responsible for them. I didn't make this person angry, or that one sad, or that one scared, or that one hurt or confused. Wow, when that settles in, that is a major up-leveling or game changer or quantum leap, whatever word you want to use, because it literally starts changing the template with which I view interactions with others. Now, the next step that I like to put in here for people is that, here's this quote from Guy Finley that says, there's nothing about this work that wants to set you up to be a doormat, to be manipulated or abused by others. And yet, if you clearly explain to people what you think is acceptable and not acceptable, whether it's off-color jokes or racist comments or, stealing little what do they call it, shoplifting, whatever it is that you think is unacceptable, and you clearly explain that to the people around you, and they refuse to change in the way that would fit what you said, then you are not responsible for what they put themselves through when you leave. And your leaving is the only thing that finally communicates to people the truth of what you believe is acceptable and not acceptable. So, if you understand that, and you understand that whatever comes out of a person's mouth is about them and not you, and that you aren't creating your emotions, many people go charging out and they want to proclaim to people, hey, you're all upset and I got nothing to do with it. It had nothing to do with me. And you can do that. It's a clear, true statement, right? But where's the compassion? Where's the humanity? Where's the connection? Where's the recognition that we all do that process? Where's the recognition that if there's pain, fear, or sadness coming out of a person, let me just start that again. If there's anger coming out of a person, swearing, name-calling, manipulation, all that means is that there's pain, fear, or sadness inside that person that they don't feel capable of or willing to deal with directly. So, I don't have to be cold and I don't have to be snarky or nasty as I talk about the very same dynamics. And I can stand in front of somebody who might be accusing me of something or spouting anger at me or name-calling me, and I can stand there without defensiveness, and I can stand there peacefully, compassionately recognizing that there's probably pain, fear, or sadness inside this person, and I can offer to help them identify it or move past it or just wish them well as I walk away, because it's not under my control to make them feel better. So all of these pieces were coming up in the session with this 20 or 29-year-old this morning, and my brain was clicking in, oh yeah, that was kind of what was happening on Tuesday, and that was kind of what was happening on Wednesday on the internet show, etc. So here's just, the intention from this end is that practically every bit of the interactions we have, whether it's in the internet show or the support groups, is used for the purpose of clarifying perception. So I'll take a breath and ask if anybody would like to ask a clarifying question or suggest a topic or revisit anything that we've been through this past week, which for some people has been pretty intense and a lot in terms of volume. Well, just please try to keep in mind that we welcome you speaking up at any level, even if I seem to be reading something or in the middle of a monologue. So since nobody's unmuting to speak up, I will return to the reading from Krishnamurti. This is the book titled Commentaries on Living, Series 2. And this section is titled Conflict, Freedom, Relationship. And the text reads, the conflict between thesis and antithesis is inevitable and necessary. It brings about synthesis, from which again there is a thesis which is corresponding to antithesis and so on. There is no end to conflict, and it is only through conflict that there can ever be any growth, any advance. Does not conflict bring about a comprehension of our problems? Does it lead to growth, advancement? It may bring about secondary improvements, but is not conflict in its very nature a factor of disintegration? Why do you insist that conflict is essential? We all know, this is someone else that's being quoted, we all know there is conflict at every level of our existence, so why deny it or be blind to it? Now, to clear this up, in the beginning of what I was reading, apparently I'm reacquainting myself with the conventions of this book. When it's in quotes, it means this is a statement someone made to Krishnamurti. So I'm going to read this again, because here's a person coming to talk to Krishnamurti that wants to say, the conflict between thesis and antithesis is inevitable and necessary. All of that is from someone other than Krishnamurti. They say it brings about synthesis, but then again there has to be a thesis and a corresponding antithesis, and so on and so on. There is no end to this conflict. There's only through conflict can there ever be any growth or advance. Now that's not Krishnamurti speaking, that's someone who's coming to him for advice. And then Krishnamurti brings in the question, wait a minute, does conflict bring about comprehension of our problems? Does it lead to growth or advancement? No, conflict can only lead to more conflict. That's Krishnamurti's point. Conflict and its very nature is a factor of disintegration. And so Krishnamurti asks the question, why do you insist that conflict is essential? This person responds, well, we all know that there is conflict at every level of existence, so why deny it or be blind to it? To which Krishnamurti responds, one is not blind to the constant strife, both within and without. But if I may ask, why do you insist that it is essential? The person replies, conflict cannot be denied. It is part of the human structure, and we use it as a means to an end, the end being the right environment for the individual. We work towards that goal and use every means to bring it about. Ambition, conflict, these are the ways of man, and it can be used either against him or for him. Through conflict, we move to greater things. This is the end of the quote from this man. Krishnamurti responds with a question. What do you mean by conflict? Conflict between what? The man replies, between what has been and what will be. Krishnamurti answers, the what will be is the further response of what has been and is. By conflict, we mean the struggle between two opposing ideas.
Can you read that set to that one piece again? Sorry, that was seemed pretty deep, but I completely missed it.
So Krishnamurti is asking the person, why do you insist that conflict is essential? What do you mean by conflict? Conflict between what and what? The person responds, between what has been and what will be. And then Krishnamurti says, the part of what, quote, what will be, close quotes, is the further response of what has been and is. In other words, what we've done is going to produce our tomorrows, right? The things that we've chosen, the mind energy we've poured our thoughts into, it carries ripple effects. And if we just keep doing the same stuff, we're going to have the same kind of conflicts and struggles in the future that we have now. So Krishnamurti says, by conflict, we mean the struggle between two opposing ideas. But he asks, is opposition in any form conducive to understanding? Think about that for yourself. If you oppose something, does it help you understand the thing you're opposing? Do you actually spend time studying deeply the thing you oppose? Or do you spend a lot more time studying what your side of the equation says it should be instead? Then he asks, when is there understanding of any problem? And the man replies, quote, there is class conflict, national conflict, and ideological conflict. Conflict is opposition. Resistance due to ignorance of certain fundamental historical facts. Through opposition, there is growth, there is progress, and this whole process is life. Now that's the party line from our culture and the Western culture, and Krishnamurti responds to that by saying, we know there is conflict at all the different levels of life, and it would be foolish to deny it. But here's a question, is this conflict essential? We have so far assumed that it is, or we have justified it with cunning reason. In nature, the significance of conflict may be quite different. Among the animals, conflict as we know it may not exist at all. But to us, conflict has become a factor of enormous import. Why has it become so significant in our lives? And when you listen to a Krishnamurti talk, sometimes because of the pacing, he's kind of quick, and I always like to stop these talks and think about some of these powerful questions. What is the nature of this or that? Why has it become so important in our lives to feed and fuel conflict? He writes, competition, ambition, the effort to be or not to be, the will to achieve, and so on, all this is part of conflict. All of this also is in the realm of thought. He goes on, why do we accept conflict as being essential to existence? This does not imply, on the other hand, that we should accept indolence. But why do we tolerate conflict within and without? Is conflict essential to understanding the problem or the resolution of a problem? Should we not investigate rather than assert or deny? Should we not attempt to find the truth of the matter rather than hold to our conclusions and opinions? Pointed questions. How many of us are able to release our conclusions and opinions and ask to be shown what we don't know yet? So here the person is quoted as responding to Krishnamurti by saying, quote, how can there be progress from one form of society to another without conflict? The haves will never voluntarily give up their wealth. They must be forced, and this conflict will bring about a new social order, a new way of life. This cannot be done pacifically, in a pacified way, or from the perspective of a pacifist. We may not want to be violent, but we have to face facts, close quotes. So here's a person justifying all kinds of violence and abuse. Has to be there. Now, Krishnamurti responds, you assume that you know what the new society should be, and that the other fellow does not. You alone have this extraordinary knowledge, and you are willing to liquidate those who stand in your way. By this method, which you think is essential, you only bring about opposition and hate. What you know is merely another form of prejudice, a different kind of conditioning. Pause to let someone else in the Zoom session. By this method, which you think is essential, you only bring about opposition and hate. What you know is merely another form of prejudice, a different kind of conditioning. Your historical studies, or those of your leaders, are interpreted according to a particular background, which determines your response. And this response you call the new approach, the new ideology. All response of thought is conditioned. And to bring about a revolution based on thought or idea is to perpetuate a modified form of what was. You are essentially reformers and not real revolutionaries. Reformation and revolution based on idea are retrogressive factors in society. In other words, they just keep taking us back to where we've been. They just keep replicating, repeating the patterns of violence and aggression and war and famine and power and imbalance of resources. It just keeps getting perpetuated because it's what it's always been. Krishnamurti goes on. You said, did you not, that the conflict between thesis and antithesis is essential, and that this conflict of opposites produces a synthesis? The man replies, quote, conflict between the present society and its opposite, through the pressure of historical events and so on, this pressure will eventually bring about a new social order, close quotes. Krishnamurti, is the opposite different or dissimilar from what is? How does the opposite come into being? Is it not a modified projection of what is? Has not the antithesis the same elements of its own thesis? The one is not wholly different or dissimilar from the other, and the synthesis is still just a modified thesis. Though periodically coded from a different color, though modified or reformed or reshaped according to circumstances and pressures, and yet the thesis is always just the same thesis. The conflict between the opposites is utterly wasteful and stupid. Intellectually or verbally, you can prove or disprove anything, but that cannot alter certain obvious facts. The present society is based on individual acquisitiveness and its opposite. With the resulting synthesis, this is what you call the new society. In your new society, individual acquisitiveness is opposed by state acquisition. The state being the rulers, the state is now all important and not the individual. From this antithesis, you say there will eventually be a synthesis in which all individuals are important. That future is imaginary. It's an ideal. It is the projection of thought. And thought is always the response of memory and of conditioning. It is really a vicious circle with no way out. This conflict, this struggling within the cage of thought, this is what you call progress. The man replies, quote, "Do you say then that we must stay as we are with all the exploitation and corruption of the present society?" Close quotes. And I love that. That's almost exactly the kind of thing people do when they're talking to Guy Finley or Michael Ryce or any other teacher and shows them something and they jump to the opposite and say, "Oh, I'm supposed to just let him walk all over me or do nothing?" No one ever says that in these deeper spiritual teachings. And so Krishnamurti responds right away and says, not at all. We are not saying that you should just allow all of the corruption in your society and all the exploitation. However, your revolution is no revolution. It is only a change of power from one group to another. It's the substitution of one class for another. Your proposed revolution is merely a different structure built out of the same material and within the same underlying pattern. There is, however, a radical revolution, which is not a conflict, which is not based on thought with its ego-made projections, ideals, dogmas, and utopias. But as long as we think in terms of changing this into that, stifling a sneeze, as long as we are talking about making this into that, or we're talking about becoming more or becoming less, or we're talking about achieving an end, as long as we're talking about any of those things, there cannot be this fundamental revolution. Such a revolution is an impossibility, says the man. Are you seriously proposing that, says the man? Krishnamurti responds, it is the only revolution, the only fundamental transformation. The man replies, how do you propose bringing it about? Krishnamurti says, by seeing the false as the false, by seeing the truth in the false. Obviously, there must be a fundamental revolution in man's relationship to man. We all know that things cannot go on as they are without increasing sorrow and disaster. And yet all reformers, like the so-called revolutionaries, have an end in view, a goal to be achieved. And both use man as a means to their own ends. The use of a man for a purpose is the real issue, and not the attainment of a particular end. You cannot separate the end from the means, for they are a single, inseparable process. Right? We've talked about this in a variety of ways. You can't hate your way into a loving relationship. You can't blow up enough buildings to usher in peace. You cannot separate the end from the means, for they are a single, inseparable process. The means is the end. There can be no classless society through the means of class conflict. The results of using wrong means for a so-called right end are fairly obvious. There can be no peace through war. There can be no peace coming through being prepared for war. All opposites are self-projected. The ideal is a reaction against what is, and the conflict to achieve the ideal is a vain and illusory struggle within the cage of thought. Now, I really like this. He's introduced thought as a cage. It's a trap. And within that cage, that illusion can seem very strong. You know, Albert Einstein says, reality is just an illusion, albeit a very persistent illusion. So Krishnamurti goes on and says, through this conflict, there's no release, there's no freedom for a man. And without freedom, there can be no happiness. Freedom is not an ideal. Freedom is the only means to freedom. As long as a man is psychologically or physically used, whether in the name of God or the state, there will be a society based on violence. Using man for a purpose is a trick employed by the politician and the priest, and it denies relationship. You might ask, as the man in this story did, what do you mean by that? In quotes. Krishnamurti responds, when we use each other for our mutual gratification, can there be a relationship between us? When you use another for your comfort, the way you would use a piece of furniture, are you related to that person? Are you relating to that person? Are you relating to the furniture? You may call it yours and all this and that, but you have no relationship with it. Similarly, when you use another person for your psychological or physical advantage, you generally call that person yours, or you possess him or her. And here's a question. Is possession relationship? The state uses the individual and calls him its citizen, and yet it has no relationship with the individual. It merely uses him as a tool. A tool is a dead thing, and there can be no relationship with that which is dead. When we use man for a purpose, however noble, we want him as an instrument, a dead thing. We cannot use a living thing, so our demand is for dead things. Our society is based on the use of dead things. The use of another makes that person dead and the instrument of our gratification. Relationship can only exist between the living, and usage is a process of isolation. It is this isolating process that breeds conflict, antagonism, both between man and man, man and woman, man and child, child and parent. So now the man in the conversation asks, why do you lay so much emphasis on relationship? To which Krishnamurti responds, thanks for the T-ball setup. Krishnamurti responds, existence is relationship. To be in existence is to be related. Relationship is society. The structure of our present society, being based on mutual use, brings about violence, destruction, and misery. And if the so-called revolutionary state does not fundamentally alter this usage, it can only produce, perhaps at a different level, still further conflict, and therefore confusion and antagonism. As long as we psychologically need and use each other, there can be no relationship. Relationship is communion. And how can there be communion if there is exploitation? Exploitation implies fear. And fear inevitably leads to all kinds of illusions and misery. Conflict exists only in exploitation and not in relationship. In other words, if you're actually in relationship with someone, you're not in a conflict with them. You're in the questioning, you're in the learning, you're in the curiosity, you're asking them to explain to you their position, and you're working diligently to compassionately grasp it and understand it from their perspective, and there is no conflict in this. Conflict exists only in exploitation, not in relationship. Conflict, opposition, enmity exists between us when there is the use of another as a means of pleasure or achievement or accumulation. This conflict obviously cannot be resolved by using it as a means to a self-projected goal. And all ideals, all utopias are self-projected. It's just a mass of thought. It's a construct of thought, and therefore a cage. He goes on, to see this is essential. All utopias are projected, self-projected. To see this is essential, for then we shall experience the truth that conflict in any form destroys relationship and understanding. Now here's a part of the Kindle where I have it highlighted, this next paragraph. There is understanding only when the mind is quiet. And the mind is not quiet when it is held in any ideology, dogma, or belief, or when it is bound to the pattern of its own experience and memories. The mind is not quiet when it is acquiring or becoming. All acquisition is conflict. All becoming is a process of isolation. The mind is not quiet when it is disciplined, controlled, or checked. Such a mind is a dead mind. It is isolating itself through various forms of resistance, and so it inevitably creates misery for itself and for others. The mind is quiet only when it is not caught in thought, which is the net of its own activity. When the mind is still, not made to be still, but it is just still, a true factor, love, comes into being, or I would say, comes into awareness as the source of our being. Because at whatever level, if we're not aware of it, we have blocked our awareness. And yet, blocking awareness of something does not end that thing. So there's a rather deep dive into relationship and conflict and process, and we have some time for comments and questions, answers, soliloquies, other topics altogether. Got about 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes. How can we support you today?
Well, this is Sally, and I am always so happy to hear your voice. I realize I love being read to. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was very fitting this time of year, as we all are in relationships of various forms and flavors. And it's very, very clear and succinct and to the point. And so it makes it helpful for me to ask myself, what is my intention here? Like, is there something I want to get from this? Or am I purely here in service and in celebration and acceptance of what is? And there are two completely different energy fields in me. And so I think it was really good timing on reading that particular part.
So what do you mean by two different energy fields in you?
Well, I actually said energy fields, F-E-E-L-S, and what I meant by that was I have a felt sense in my body now that lets me know when I'm striving or craving or attached or I have a significant agenda. There's a feeling in my body that I now have developed that lets me know, it's usually some form of contraction, that lets me know maybe I want to pause and ask to be shown something. It's in the pause that there's so much amazing, miraculous power. And yet, if I don't pause, I don't have access to the possible miracle of shift. And so I deeply appreciated you reading that at this time.
All right.
I hope that was clear.
Well, each of us are going to have to try and apply this to our own experience. And I just strongly recommend keeping the breath moving as you try and get through a listen like that or a paragraph like that, because it's pretty dense stuff. And,
yes.
And it is dense in a 180-degree different perspective than what we've been living, what we've been taught, conditioned into, etc.
You're so right about that.
Good morning, everybody.
So, Linda,
good
welcome.
Morning.
Thank you, Sally, for that offering.
Mm-hmm.
My thought after listening to Krishnamurti was, oh my goodness, I could have stuck with Krishnamurti for the last 55 years and been a lot better off. I really loved him. And I walked away and went somewhere else. Not because he bothered me. It just happened. Everything is in the right time-space sequence. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
But the other side, that was one thing. And I'm convinced that what came out of that was my becoming a fat pacifist in the late 60s. My experience with the hippie movement in Marin County. My journey since then, and coming into the Aramaic Gospel to explore it. And I may go back to Krishnamurti.
Well, I would just point out that
with all of the
work,
special.
Let me interrupt you and point out that in this work we would just try and call your attention to the fact that unless you've been holding out on us and you have a time machine that would allow you to go back and do it differently, that's not a useful pattern of thought.
I understand that totally.
And so it's not so much that you should have this or that, it's that, oh, I recognize I did that. It's taken me on this path, which has been perfect in ways I can't even begin to understand. And now let me decide, now that it's being presented to me again, do I want to reinvest some energy into that?
Perfect. You said it, what I was attempting to explain much, much better than I. And it wasn't a should for me, it was a could have. Could have.
Same thing. Oh, it's the same thing. You're playing with words. It's in the past.
I may be.
You can't could have or should have.
You're right.
Now, maybe somebody living on an alternate timeline that was you did stick with Krishnamurti all these years, and maybe you'll meet them when the Palladians come down. I don't know. I don't know any of that stuff.
Well, maybe it's already in me, and it doesn't have anything to do with being within the Pleiades. I'm not here to offer only one point of view. I actually dialed in because last night was not a good night for me because I was coughing all night long, really badly, and you can hear it in my voice, I suspect. However, what came out of that was really marvelously wonderful was I framed out a worksheet that I would love to do. It's too late probably to do it today. And I framed it out in a space of clarity. And within the framing it out, I received more clarity. And so the frame is
the thought causing it?
A deep exhaustion, and the thought was I have no space to breathe, to express what's true for me and to be heard. And the goal is I want space to be. Breathe and be is kind of the same, but I went with breathe on purpose because I am already, even though I don't experience that. I want space to breathe, express what's true for me, and be heard so I can rest in the peace, love, and joy that I am. That's my goal.
Okay. Now you've got it framed out. All it needs to happen is for you to just breathe and recite your I forgive or I'm canceling my need to be right stuff. So I don't know what's blocked you from doing that, but I'd be happy to support you in doing that, even though we could only do the meditation here for a minute or two before we run out of time. But you know the routine.
Yes, because I am feeling clear. I'm feeling clear and I'm feeling calm, and at the same time I feel the vibration in my body. It has a different quality. Okay, let's go.
Just silently inside your own mind, repeat, I cancel my need to be right. I cancel my need for anyone or anything to change, including myself. I specifically cancel the goal in this worksheet. I put my conscious logical mind on the shelf for now, and I ask to be shown the hidden part of my own mind that's actually creating this upset. And then just breathe and soften and allow. Anything that comes into your awareness, whether it's a noise or a physical sensation or a memory of the past, is going to be exactly what you need to see to begin to heal here and move forward. Just watch, breathe and soften, trusting it's all old stuff. Anything that comes to your mind right now is so old, you've already lived through it, and it's perfectly safe for you to feel it and study it up close as it washes over you. And then just take a breath or two, and because we're time limited here, take a breath or two, hold it at the top and slowly exhale, and then scan your body and notice what's the strongest physical sensation or the strongest emotion you're aware of right now.
The strongest emotion is the exhaustion.
Does
And
the exhaustion come
also,
up even stronger when you do that release?
no,
All right.
it's less.
Okay.
Because what this framing out has done for me is show me what is the choice that is most sacred and most helpful for me in this moment. I have a memory, I have several memories of being in the church and feeling all of this logic and these dogmas come at me. And I finally one day just said, and the rage that's actually was behind them, the hostility behind them, feeling that in a physical way by various memories that just brought me up short at the time that I experienced the event. I'm very tired of being whipped by words and belief systems within myself and from the outside both.
Okay, so take a breath and just breathe into the idea that you want to just release your attachment to thoughts
yes,
and beliefs inside of yourself.
Yes.
Just breathe into that.
Yes.
And then we're going to have to end the call here, but then give yourself permission to make some paper and pen notes about what this little release was like and what's getting stirred up here. And make one of those notes be this specific thing that you, Celinda, just said you want the benefit that might come from just watching your thoughts and chuckling at them rather than believing them and getting pushed around by them. And you're capable of practicing that attitude, that position, that perspective, whatever you want to call it, that you create as your way of relating to the thoughts that move through your mind. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to defend them. You don't have to deny them. You can just watch them and let them move on and get yourself to move on. So, thanks as always for your comments and your willingness to do some processing. I look forward to hearing how that pans out for you. And like whatever residue there might have been from the worksheet you did in the group last night. And I will just remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff that we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. And despite my observations to the contrary at times, every single time that life did not go the way I thought it should, it always turned out far better than I ever imagined.